Hey everyone, and welcome back. So I just got home, got caught in a bit of a rainstorm. Apologize, I tried to clean myself up as best I could, but yeah. Unfortunately it happens, but that's obviously not why you're watching this video. I did, in fact, get in the new 4K release of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This is the Dark Sky release here in the US, and I decided which one to go to, either the Steelbook or the standard release, and I went with the Steelbook, even though, yes, I think it actually ended up costing me like $10 more, but mainly because it does have the original poster artwork on the front, which I'll show you real quick. It's that beautiful front cover of the Steelbook, which I absolutely love, that original poster. And there's the side with the title, and unfortunately there's nothing on the back. It's literally just a plain white back, which is kind of a shame. I mean, I wish there was just something on the back, but I do love the front, and obviously the front is pretty much what I'll see in my collection. And it does have actually a nice image on the inside though, as well as the 2 discs. So here's the 4K disc, and here's the Blu-ray with a bunch of the extras on it. And it does have which is very cool, a mini poster. One side has the original one sheet, and the other side has the newer one sheet artwork, which I think this was done for the 40th anniversary, if I'm not mistaken. And let me just pull these discs out so you can see the image on the inside of the Steelbook. So here's the inside image right there, which you can see from towards the end of the film. Now, actually, this light right here, which you can see, let's see if you can get close. This light right here, I'm actually going to mention in a moment. So take notice of that, because actually, I think that's fine. I don't have images for references for some of the stuff I'm going to talk about. So I'm actually not going to do a review. I decided to hold off on that, mainly because I haven't been able to go through everything, and I haven't been able to really compare it. I've actually only compared this to one other thing, just for a quick reference, and that was actually the iTunes copy, which is one that they provided. It is in 4K, but it's an SDR one. It's been up there for a while. Now the 4K, now the transfer on this is the same restoration, I believe, from several years ago. It does use the transfer that Tobe Hooper did sign off on, as well as it does not have any noise reduction. The thing about Texas Chainsaw Massacre is, of course, put that down. You guys know what film I'm talking about. It was shot on 16mm film back in 1973, I believe. And the film stock that they used was a little bit different. Now, obviously, 16mm is different from 35, you know, not just in number, but in other ways as well. 16mm film generally is, because it is a smaller format, it does be a little bit grainier. It doesn't have the same latitude that 35 has as far as the range when you go through the entire spectrum. Now, and that does become apparent here, but you can still get a lot from 16mm films. In fact, there's been a lot of 4K releases from 16mm films that look absolutely fantastic. But the interesting thing about Texas Chainsaw Massacre is that they shot it on a film stock that does not give itself too much latitude as far as the information that's there. Pretty much what was shot is what's there. Now, in the case, when I say latitude, what I mean is when you shoot on film, you can basically sort of have a shot that's sort of overexposed, for example, but there's still information in that. So even as you're watching it, it's the raw image can be very white, you know, very blown out. But you can actually adjust that, and there's information in that. So same thing with the shadow detail in many ways, but at the same time, the shadow detail you can't really make brighter without bringing up a lot of extra grain and everything, and that just goes for any format. But there is some detail in the gray area. Now, in the case of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, because of the film stock they ended up using, you can't actually have any of the that extra information either in the highs or the lows. Pretty much it is as it is. So you can't really, so in the blown out shots, for example, perfect example, in the van, you know, the windows are very white, even though they actually are driving. You can, if you look carefully, you can see a little bit, you know, like a tree kind of going by or something occasionally, but it's basically very blown out because they exposed for the actors on the inside, not for the outside. So that is a prime case where there's not really much you could do. Now, in other formats, you could actually pull that down and access information. You could actually see the sky and the background and everything, but you can't do that here. It's pretty much is as is. The same thing with the sort of darker elements of the image. They're pretty much dark, and that's not going to change no matter what. Now, the reason why I need to mention that is because it does come into play with the way Texas Chainsaw Massacre has always appeared on home video over the years. Now, it was shot on 16mm film, but it was blown up to 35 for theatrical just distribution, and it was also used, that 35mm blow up was actually used for most of the home video releases throughout the years, because the original 16mm negative, it was found, if I remember the story correctly, in the mid to late 90s. It was actually found, I kid you not, in a bag in someone's garage. But yeah, that's how it wasn't stored in some vault somewhere, with like the perfect, temperature setting and everything, like a lot of Hollywood films are. Literally sitting in someone's garage for, a couple decades. So from about like late 90s onward, any official release of Texas Chainsaw Massacre was indeed stemming from the original 16mm elements and not from the 35mm blow up. Now, Texas Chainsaw Massacre has always been a very grainy film, and even though 16mm can look very clear, going back to that film stock, it is a lot grainier than a lot of other 16mm films can be. And thankfully for this release, none of that has been scrubbed away. They didn't apply any noise reduction or anything. The grain is indeed intact, and I know the temptation would be to clean it up even a little bit, and luckily they did not do that. They left it alone, and I'm so appreciative of that. And the audio I know there's some audio issues, I believe, with older releases. I believe that's all been fixed here. Again, I can't, because I'm not doing a full review just yet, I can't guarantee 100%, but I believe some of the audio issues have been corrected. So for example, as far as audio goes, it has several options. It has the original mono mix, thank goodness, and I believe that is the original mono mix. It's not a down mix of the later surround mix that was done, which, by the way, is included. It's got the original mono mix, it's got a 5.1 mix, I believe it has a 7.1 mix, I think, as well as a brand new Dolby Atmos mix. Out of curiosity, I did watch it with the Dolby Atmos mix. I didn't do too much. I didn't really notice much Atmos stuff. I actually didn't really notice too much surround sound kind of thing, but it's just kind of fun. It's on there. It's like it's a nice extra, nice bonus to have. And as far as the picture goes, so again, luckily they didn't scrub it clean. They left it at is. It is the again, the transfer that Tobe Hooper did sign off on, and they are giving it a 4K release in HDR. And I think this is where, unfortunately, a couple minor issues may have occurred. So I was able to do, so as I was watching it, I was able to notice two things specifically, outside of, obviously, luckily, the grain is intact and some of that stuff, and obviously some of the issues that are just literally sort of what I call burned into the original film elements are there. I mean, they would be anyway, but I just mean, like, there's nothing wrong or anything. There's just two issues. One, there was some very minor compression artifacts. I think there were a couple shots that, because they are so grainy, I could tell that the compression was having some issues. Now, it's not bad. Luckily, it wasn't like big, giant, blocks of compression issues, but it was noticeable. But it luckily wasn't too, I didn't see it a lot. It was kind of minor, and honestly, because it is sort of lost in grain and kind of in the background, I was looking for it, because again, I do plan on reviewing it, so I was looking for things for the sake of a review, but if I was just watching it, I don't know if I would have noticed it or not, and I think most people may not. So that one is kind of like, I mean, it's there, but it's, as much as I don't want any compression at all, I don't think it was as bad as I've seen in other releases. But definitely the main issue that I do want to cover is, unfortunately, much like Friday the 13th, the 4K release from several months ago, from this recording anyway, there is some clipping in the highs. Now, it could be clipping in the lows and in the dark things, but because, again, because this is a completely different film in relation to, again, the film stock and everything, if it is clipping in the lows, you wouldn't notice it anyway, just because there's nothing more you can pull out of that shadow detail anyway that you could in other films, that were shot on, let's say, a different film stock. The fact that a lot of these elements, again, are sort of burned into the original film elements, like some of the overexposure shots, which again look great. And the problem is, but some of those highlights, you do see that digital clipping. Now, what do I mean by that is, so for the sake of video, especially in this case, you have a range of information from very bright to very dark as to what can be displayed properly on any display, no matter what it is, TV, projector, whatever. If you go outside of that, you lose your shadow detail in the lows, and on the high specifically, you get this very harsh white image that does not look, it looks very unnatural. I mean, for the lack of a better word, it just, it's very, very harsh, if that makes sense. Like a blown out or very bright white on film, for example, almost is, it's white and it's bright, but it almost has a bite, like a softness to it. Whereas a digital clipping that can happen, it's a very harsh white. It doesn't look like it looks very digital, for lack of a better word. Now, luckily, unlike Friday the 13th, it's very minimal. It's not in a lot of shots. It's mainly in shots where the sun is very, very bright, or if you have a light that's very, very bright. But it's actually minimal. So, for example, there were plenty of shots of the sky that actually look fine, but there were moments where the sun would hit like part of a cloud or something that would clip. So that would have that horrible, horrible white clipping look to it. And then a couple moments, like for example, in the van when they're, in early on, when they pick up the hitchhiker and that whole scene, even though the windows again are blown out, and because that's the way it was shot, luckily that doesn't have any of that, which I was very happy to see. It's more just other shots, kind of little shots here and there where the sun is just hitting something and it's just clipping at those highs. But another area in the nighttime scenes, I did notice it with some light sources. So for example, like lamps and things like that. Not too bad. But you do, again, it's there, and you do lose a little bit of detail. For example, the lamp that I was showing you on the back of this, which you still see this thing right here, which is over the dinner table, which you see briefly here and there. During that scene, there's in the movie, there's sort of like a skin mask over that lamp. And because it is clipping, you're sort of, even though it's very bright, you're sort of losing some of the details of, you kind of see a little bit more of the skin normally, but you can't really see too much of it here. Now, again, I did check the SDR 4K file that's currently on iTunes, although I assume that could be updated at some point. So this is the older 4K file, but I'm glad it was still there because I could do a very quick comparison. And sure enough, a lot of these clipping issues are not present in that, especially in that lamp specifically, or that light, is the fact that you could see more of the face in that version than you can in this one. Now, is this the end of the world? No, it's not like Friday the 13th, where to me it ruined a lot, only because it ruined a lot of the daytime shots, and in that film it ruined a lot of the stuff at night, because unlike Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Friday the 13th does have, because it's shot in 35, it does have that more latitude in the shadows, which you kind of lost in that sort of botched HDR pass. That's kind of what I'm assuming happened there. And I'm assuming something similar happened here. It just wasn't as good of an HDR pass as it should be. Because there are moments in this where it does look great. There's a lot of moments where it just, really, really looks good. A lot of the stuff at night looks really good. Again, once I noticed the clipping, unfortunately I was looking at it. And there's even some shots, for example, the moon at night. You see that nice full moon where the clouds are sort of, moving past it. And it looks great. And then as soon as they pass it fully, where you kind of get the full glow of the moon, I started seeing that little bit of clipping in the moon as well. It's just there. Now, some people may wonder, well, is it your equipment? Is it anything? Because, a lot of my 4K stuff I do watch on my Sony projector back here, which I've now had for 2 years. And I've only had 2 movies that have had that clipping, for lack of a better word. I'm just calling it that. And that is indeed the Friday the 13th 4K and now Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I've never had it in any other 4K film. So it's not my projector. It is, now it may not be as noticeable because I am watching on a projector. Of course, I don't have Dolby Vision on this. I do have HDR, but not Dolby Vision. So maybe Dolby Vision is able to kind of smooth that out, which is very possible. Maybe it's not as bad on that and not as noticeable. And again, it's not that bad. It's little things here and there. So I'm not dogpiling this release at all, because I think overall, so far from what I can tell, it's a really great release. But I kind of felt I need to mention these things because I know there have been a lot of questions about this release, because a lot of us have been waiting for this for a very long time. Now, I do have the Second Sight 4K release on pre-order. I probably won't have it for several more weeks. Now, once that comes in, I will do a sort of a comparison review of both of them, because it's going to be interesting to see the Second Sight one, because I know the Second Sight one, it's using the same base transfer as the Dark Sky one, but I believe they're doing some additional cleanup for their release, and of course, they'd be doing their own HDR pass as well as their own compression. It'd be interesting to see how that release sort of compares. Now, should that stop you from buying this release, no. Friday the 13th, I was much more like, we should get a replacement. We never did, but, I was a little bit more harsh on that release. This one, not so much, because I think these problems are, the compression specifically, I don't think is bad. It's just, it's there a little bit, and I just do have to mention it for the sake of, being honest in reviews. And again, the clipping is there, but because it's so minor, I just don't think most people will see it. But it's important for me to mention it. So again, just some quick initial thoughts. I do want to compare it actually to a couple other releases. So that's why this is sort of not a review. That will be coming. I know, I'm sorry this is sort of a rambling video. I kind of just wanted to just talk about some of this stuff real quick. But if you have any questions, definitely let me know. I'll try and answer them as best I can. If there's anything you want me to look for specifically for the review, just, ask away and I'll include it in there. And if you picked it up, definitely let me know your thoughts. Let me know if you've noticed anything, or if not, I mean, again, it may just be me, and I'm perfectly okay with just, saying that. So those are my initial thoughts on the Dark Sky 4K release of Tobe Hooper's Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And as always, thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next one.